The 2019 NFL draft class is 3 years into their careers, and this is about the time where you can fairly assess whether a player has or has not panned out for a franchise, and whether or not that said player is going to be a long-term asset for the franchise that selected them. Some, as you will see in today's video, certainly have not, and we did grade picks 1 through 16 during Sunday's video, and the link for that will be in the bio, so we all know why we're here, and without further ado, let's begin. Nikhil Harry, the wide receiver from Arizona State, was the final pick of the first round in 2019, and whoo boy did I, and several others for that matter, whiff on this one. I thought, man, Nikhil is going up to New England to be the big-bodied receiver they'll need. He'll draw a lot of one-on-ones with Julian Edelman on the other side. Also, please remember Gronk retired after the 2018 season, so they were never teammates, and simply put, Nikhil never panned out. He has 57 career catches for 598 career receiving yards through 3 years and just 4 touchdowns. An easy F. Tackle Caleb McGarry is a tough one to grade, as he was the Atlanta Falcons' second first-round pick of the night, the other being guard Chris Lindstrom at number 14 overall. McGarry has not been a good tackle for them, and they were hoping they could double dip in the first round and have what would equate to 40% of their offensive line for the long term. Well, they did hit on Chris Lindstrom, credit to them, but like the old saying goes for the first round, 1/3 are stars, 1/3 are average, and 1/3 are draft busts. Caleb is unfortunately part of the last group, but what I will say in his favor is he has played 45 games and started 44 of them, so he hasn't been an all-time bust per se, and those starts do count towards something. And just because he started a lot of games doesn't mean he's an A or A+, let's get that clear. 3 years later, Caleb gets a D+. Corner Deandre Baker from Georgia was the third Giants' first-round pick of the night, and they traded up from the early part of the second round to get him, thinking they'd get the nice fifth-year option and have a good corner for quite a while. Well, Baker was involved in a legal situation in what was quite bizarre at the time and was released before the 2020 season started. This is quite the trend to start the video, as all three are not good, and because he only played a year for New York, DeAndre Baker gets an F. He is now a member of the Kansas City Chiefs. LJ Collier was Seattle's first-round pick, and LJ hasn't quite panned out the way Seattle or his fans thought he would, and that's really putting it nicely. Collier was 24 years old as a rookie, which meant he had to produce and learn the system pretty quickly, and LJ never produced to say the least. He has just 32 career tackles and 3 total sacks. You could argue out of all of the bad first-round picks Seattle made from 2011 on, this one takes the cake for the worst. An F for LJ Collier. Tillery, a defensive tackle from Notre Dame, was the LA Chargers' first-round pick, and when you look back at this can be described as why NFL teams go for best players available over a team need. There were countless good players on the board and better at their position than Tillery was as a defensive tackle. Jerry was routinely mocked in the mid to late second round, and the Chargers should have been looking to trade back and get more picks if this was indeed their guy, because he was more than likely going to be there for a while. Now, of course, had Tillery worked out, we would all, myself included, be praising them for snagging their guy even despite the criticism. Unfortunately, it did not, and 3 years in, Jerry gets a D. The Giants were not the only team with 3 first-round selections, as the Raiders did as well, and this was their third of the night in Jonathan Abram. And if you followed my channel for a little bit, you know I've never liked this selection because I never understood how the Raiders watched a 23-year-old quarterback at the time in Patrick Mahomes throw for 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns in 2018 and say, let's go ahead and draft a box safety, knowing we're going to have to play this guy for probably 15 years. And Abram has proven over 3 years he's not good in coverage, which makes this tough to grade because it's really not Abram's fault he was drafted where he was in the division he's in. He did pick it up a lot in 2021, but I don't think Abram will ever be this Pro Bowl player and this game-changing player, and I do think Raiders fans would agree. And for today, Jonathan gets a C+. Next up is Myles Sweat, and this was a pick I had very high hopes for, and even higher hopes after Washington drafted Chase Young the next year. Sweat has shown extreme flashes at times, yet has also disappeared at points in his career. His pass rush win rate in 2021 was very low, and he has not quite turned out to be the player I thought he would be. He certainly hasn't been bad like LJ Collier, for example, but I legitimately thought him and Chase Young would be double-digit sack teammates for a while, yet neither have achieved that yet. Now, maybe I had astronomical expectations for Montez, maybe I didn't, but 3 years in, we give him a B. Marquise Hollywood Brown was the first receiver drafted that night, and this was after a trade back with the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, Marquise is in a situation in Baltimore where they do not pass the ball as much as other NFL teams do, so naturally his numbers will be limited compared to other receivers across the league, and having a great tight end as a teammate of Mark Andrews will also hinder his numbers. Now, I do think Hollywood is a good receiver and would be a consistent 1,000-yard player if he were in another offense, and through 3 years he has nearly 200 catches for over 2,300 yards and 21 total touchdowns, which isn't bad at all. He will more than likely receive a 5th-year option and ultimately an extension from the Ravens, and we give this an A-. The second of the Raiders' first-round selections now in Josh Jacobs, and I have mixed feelings towards this. On one hand, you have a running back who is a 2-time 1,000-yard rusher and a player who has been relatively productive. He has been a good, but certainly not great running back, and has a Pro Bowl to his name and 3 1,200 total yard seasons on his resume. But when I watch the Raiders play, I can't help but think they need more from the running back position. And that's what makes this so tough to grade, because he's not an elite player, and you don't think of elite running backs and go, Dalvin Cook, Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, Josh Jacobs. You just don't, right? But 3 years in, we give this, because of how productive he's been, an A-. Tytus Howard was the Texans' first-round pick, and this was after the entire world knew they wanted Deandre Dillard, who the Eagles picked at number 22 by jumping the Texans. That's where the Hollywood Brown trade reference earlier came in. The Texans, like the Chargers, took a second-round prospect in Tytus, but unlike the Chargers, you could argue this has worked out. Howard has been a bright spot for the Texans in what has otherwise been the lowest of lows over the past couple of years in their franchise's history, and Tytus has a lot of versatility on the line. He ended 2021 in a hot streak at left tackle, and him stepping up allows Houston to explore the possibility of trading Laramie Tunsil, and Tytus gets a B+. Andre Diller to Philly was the pick, as we mentioned during the Tytus Howard analysis, and despite being the consensus better prospect to Tytus Howard, Andre has had an inferior career to Tytus thus far. Dillard has just 9 starts over 3 years, and I understand injuries happen, but there's also a reason why Dillard is rumored in trades for countless teams. Teams don't just say, hey, we're going to trade our franchise left tackle so we can get some draft capital, you know what I mean? It's because he has been a disappointment in Philly, and he has not been worth the first-round selection, and Andre Dillard gets a D. The Green Bay Packers traded with the Seattle Seahawks to come up and get safety Darnell Savage at 21, and depending who you ask, you either get Savage is a beast, he's a great player, and the Packers should extend him and make him be one of the top 3 highest-paid safeties in the NFL, or you generally get the opposite and you get he's kind of overrated and I don't think he's worth all the hype. And to be honest, he's somewhere in between, because if you think Savage is a top 2 or 3 safety, he's not, but he's also not this bottom feeder player either. He's between an average and above average player, and I do think the Packers will wind up with a starter for 7 to 8 years, which is easier said than done. A B grade for Darnell. Noah Fant was the second tight end drafted in the first round on this night, and him and Hawkeye teammate, that's the University of Iowa, by the way, TJ Hawkinson were supposed to take over the league. Noah has not had the best quarterback situation throughout his NFL career, and that's really putting it mildly. He has just 10 touchdowns through 3 years, and again, there's a reason for that that's not necessarily his fault. He is productive given the circumstances he's in, but will never truly flourish if Denver does not do something at the quarterback position. I'd be lying if I said I don't think Fant can become a truly great player, because I think he can be, but we haven't been able to see that yet, and for now, Fant gets a B+. Jeffrey Simmons was viewed as a top 5 prospect coming out of Mississippi State, but tore his ACL in February of the draft process. One thing I never understood was why teams in the top 5 or 10 just moved him off their board or to the middle of the second round, and more than likely you were selecting that high for a reason and just chose to pass on an elite prospect because he'd missed, a few months of his rookie year, and that never made sense to me. A few years later, Simmons has made those teams that passed on him regret it. He is a very good football player and will be for quite a while. Credit the Titans for having the patience with him and let him wreak havoc on the field, because the selection has more than proved to be worth it. An A+ grade 3 years later. Center Garrett Bradbury was the Minnesota Vikings' first-round selection, and while he has been relatively durable, the play has not been good from him. He will get replaced at some point, and the only question is when, because again, he has not been a great player. He has not been woeful by any means, but the only reason he may start for this team in 2022 is because he's on the rookie deal. He is a cheap lineman, and again, he's not absolute bottom tier, and simply put, there are higher priority positions for the Vikings to get and acquire this offseason, most notably corner. A C- grade for Bradbury. We have arrived to Dexter Lawrence, the Giants' nose tackle at pick 17, and believe it or not, I did not have a problem with this pick had it worked out. And there's still a possibility it does, by the way. If it works out for the Giants in their own way, the way Vita Vea did for the Bucs, we know how dominant the possibility that is. Dexter also ran a 5.05 40-yard dash at 340 plus pounds, and that's some freak athleticism from the big fella. To give you an idea of how crazy this is, his 40 time is closer to Josh Allen's was than what Josh Allen's 40 is to Justin Jefferson's, again, at 340 plus pounds. Now, Dexter has shown flashes at times, but when you have a player that big, you can't play him as much as the Giants do at times, and he naturally wears down over the course of a game. I still do think he can be a very good football player for what his role would consist of. You just can't have him play more than 45 snaps a game, which the Giants did 10 times in 2021. For now, a C+ grade, but I do think he can be dominant in a traditional nose tackle role. Ideally, I'd like to see him at 35 to 40 snaps per game. And with that being said, that's all I have for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I have enjoyed the nice feedback from you guys, and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you enjoyed, now is the time I ask you to please leave a like and subscribe to the channel, because it would truly mean the world. And until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.